Welcome, Ben Prentice. Thank you for being on the Wholesome Crypto podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. For those who don't know Ben Prentice, he is a producer for What Bitcoin Did, and he also is the author of WTF Happened in 1971. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man. It's good to see you, Rudy.
It's good to see you too. I know we've chatted up a little bit over dinner a few weekends ago, and it's good to see you here in Boston. So, it's been a pretty wild ride so far in the crypto industry, especially now what's going on with the new amendment.
And the infrastructure bill, which by the time this episode drops, will probably already have been decided. But it's crazy stuff.
It's going to be pretty wild how it's going to change how America works with cryptocurrency, and I'm pretty excited what's going to happen. I honestly don't think much will change since the whole Bitcoin or cryptocurrency industry is supposed to be decentralized. And I feel like it might just be one of those flip-flop threats where they're going to try to stop it, but then change it around again. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, even if it does pass like in some onerous way, it seems to me that they have no idea what they're talking about, and they're being so ambiguous in the language because they have no idea what they're talking about, and because some of this stuff will be so unenforceable and detrimental to innovation in America. I think it will be fought very hard, even if it's just at the lawyer and the judge level, or if they're appealing it or whatever. And none of this stuff goes into effect until like 2023 or 2024 or something like that. So it's just a whole lot of just frustration right now. That's all.
Yeah, it's the growing pains of crypto. It's just, we're gonna figure it out eventually. But yeah, before we get deep into the cryptocurrency topics, I want to get to know more about what you were doing before Bitcoin. What was life for Ben pre-Bitcoin?
Oh man, I worked in restaurant industry for a very long time, but I've always been like interested in lots of different things. I was into 3D graphics and media production, video, audio. I was in a rock band for 13 years, actually.
What did you play?
I play the electric guitar. I mean, I know a few other instruments too, but I play a lot of lead, like classical rock, heavy metal, stuff like that. A lot of grunge, alternative rock.
Did you sing at all?
Oh yeah, mostly like kind of more backups, but I can carry a tune here from point A to point B.
How many years did you do that?
I played music for over 20 years, but I was in an actual active band playing shows and making albums for over 13 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And then I also eventually got into Bitcoin. But so I've always had a lot of different, interests and stuff, and I learned a few languages along the way.
Nice.
Yeah.
What languages do you know, or did you try to learn?
Well, I speak Spanish and Portuguese pretty fluently.
I mean, yeah, especially in Boston here, we have a huge community of Portuguese people, so that's awesome. Yeah, it's probably a good language to know around here too. Spanish is always a clutch language to have.
For sure.
Sweet. And then, I guess, were you always an innovative person? Were you always trying to find the latest tech and jump on the bandwagon and really learn about it? Or was Bitcoin the one that just hit you really hard and you went rolling with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have always been into technology, for as long as I can remember. My dad, when growing up, had 5 or 6 computers in the house, which is unheard of. I mean, we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s and stuff. And there was one room in my house where there was at least 3 computers in that one room. And they were, these are old CRT monitors, right? So it's not so the monitors themselves took up a fair amount of space in the room. So you walk in this one room, and I used to joke to my friends when they come over, I was like, yeah, then this is mission control over here, because you had all these computers everywhere. But I remember even we were 10, 11 years old, my dad had computers in like each one of our rooms. So we had like, it was DOS at that point. It was DOS, right? And we were like playing like text-based games like Ukrel and
quarter-inch floppies.
Yes, 100%. And at some point I remember too, like when the internet was starting to come out, he eventually like ran Ethernet cable like through our house, so we'd even have like internet in our rooms.
You had Ethernet back then?
Oh yeah, yeah. He'd running Cat5 thick cable. Like he even like drilled some holes through the ceiling and ran some up and down the stairs and stuff. But
were the computers on all the time?
No. You would turn on the computer just to do something, and then you would turn it off, right? Like that was
things weren't running 24/7 back then.
No, definitely not. And you have to wait for the computer. So like you turn the computer on, go like make a cup of coffee and come back, that kind of thing. But we know what I remember like really, really well is like being like 10, 11 years old. And there's that, have you seen that clip of like, I think it's Good Morning America when they're like, what is the internet anyway? The @ sign or whatever. It's like, I remember being 10 and 11 years old and being like, I would have had such a better answer than those people who are like literally like on TV adults. And I could have given them a much better answer. That was they called internet like a computer billboard or something, and it was obviously this network that at the time you could not move a lot of data around. It was very limited by bandwidth, and I could see even from like 10 to 11 to 12 years old, I could see the band. I went from like a 14.4 modem to like a 56K modem or something, and I saw that progression. I was like, well, extrapolating out here, you're going to be able to send like HD video all around the globe at like near zero cost, like in the near future. And like, I was trying to like figure out, what types of things that would enable.
And that's what always amazes me the most now is that now we have so much, data available and data speeds, storage space. It feels like it's almost infinite. But that also worries me is our people and developers taking into consideration creating the most efficient application. Just because we have all this capability, are we still trying to create our apps more efficiently? I download the Facebook Messenger app on my phone. It's like a couple hundred megabytes, and there's other gaming apps that are like over gigabyte file sizes. I'm like, do we even need this stuff? Is it even taking into consideration of downsizing as much as we can? But
we are in the too much information age, and I grew up in the information age. So like after I kind of started going to college and stuff like that, I remember I had a PDA, right? So like there was like original, like the Palm Pilots were like a monochrome screen, like those old Casio watches, right? It was like it wasn't even backlit. Yeah, it was like that. It was like it wasn't even backlit, and then like eventually I saw the evolution of those devices, and I had something that was like a precursor to what an iPhone was. It was like a Sony Clie PDA. So it was like really so it was like one of the
I remember those.
Yeah, it was like one of the last evolutions of PDAs before like smartphones came along and just wiped them out. But I remember carrying this thing around with me all the time. Always looking for Wi-Fi because it didn't have a cell chip in it. So and I like walking around school, and like I was a weird person for having a computer in my pocket. I remember like being at work, whatever, and like maybe reading something at work. People were like, why do you have a computer? Put your little computer away, right? And it's really funny that you saw like the now that we're all in the smartphone generation, and as you said, the too much information age, we're all trying to come to grips with that. But I think it's a good thing for society, Rudy. I think we see this like this fake news era, right? I think that's really just a realization where we already were, and we're starting to see the narrative come apart that these centralized, news organizations or whatever had any kind of authority in the first place. And but in trying to like, we are like children in this internet age and this too much information age, and we're trying to sort through it now. And that's I maybe I push back on your kind of like, are we creating too much data? Because I think in the long run that's deflationary. I think we're not really going to have a storage problem, but the sorting problem is a real problem, and connecting people and figuring out what's good versus bad information, that's still something that we're still figuring out.
And hopefully we'll figure it out. But yeah, I don't.
No,
it's not something in the near future. I don't think it's a large enough problem yet for us, especially with all the cloud computing. It just no one even realizes that the giant mega data centers that Google, Amazon, and Microsoft all have, and how much information they're hosting for most of the globe.
Yeah, I mean
Mm-hmm.
that's fair. I think hard drive space is cheap. I think maybe we're doing too much replication. I think cloud computing is going to kind of go away in the future. I think because technology is getting cheaper all the time, and because we're losing our privacy to these services, and being able to replicate the same functionality at home is going to be just as cheap. I think we'll stop giving it away to all these organizations that want all our data and are trying to encourage all that. So, no, but I don't
We'll see
know.
how it goes. And then, as this industries keep changing and you're starting to see a different trend and pattern growing than, you first hear about Bitcoin. What was your first reaction? Like, is this the end all be all? Is this going just some weird punk news that you're listening to and just kind of brushed it off? How is it for you?
Yeah, more the latter. I was reading at the time, probably in between these two periods I was talking about. I was reading Slashdot very heavily. So Slashdot, news for nerds. It was like the hub of computer developers and stuff in the 90s. And the article, I think the first article on Slashdot came around 2011 or 2012. I don't remember. But I definitely remember it coming around. I remember vaguely reading discussions of people that are much smarter than I am, trying to understand why this thing is important. And you have to understand that even the internet's understanding and even the geeks' understanding of what Bitcoin was then, it was absolutely nowhere near what our understanding of it is today. And I think our understanding of it today is still somewhat flawed and still somewhat naive. But obviously we've made a lot of progress. But I got to give these guys credit. They understood there was something really important there. I think I also say that I couldn't grok the technicals of what A, the problem it solved was, and B, how elegantly it solved that problem. So I think my overall take on Bitcoin was that looks interesting. It's some kind of internet money thing, but it will probably never work. I mean, you got to understand, reading Slashdot, it was every day you're inundated with oh, this is brand new battery technology is going to solve all of our battery storage. But every single day was something like that. So I was yeah, it's a really cool idea, but it'll probably never work. But I think a lot of people take multiple touches to Bitcoin and to really come to it. So again, in 2013 or 2014, it was oh, people are actually using this thing to buy drugs on the internet. And I almost went and bought some drugs on the internet with it. But I thought it was anonymous. I thought Bitcoin, the whole purpose of it was it's specifically an anonymous, kind of like what Monero claims itself to be today. So when I went to Mt. Gox to buy Bitcoin, it was okay, so give us your license, your bank account. And I was
It's still KYC.
This isn't basically KYC. I was this isn't anonymous. So I basically forgot about it again until 2017, and Number Grow Up brought me back.
That reminds me how you're saying how people were just kind of talking about whatever and might be putting their own comments and opinions on Bitcoin if it's going to work or not. That reminds me of today of Hacker News, how a lot of crypto posts are usually talked down on by very educated people who are really, really good in their industry, really understand how technology works. And I always see their comments of going back and forth that just won't work. That people don't understand how much data it's using up, or how much energy it's consuming, or if just straight out politically and human beings might not be able to work together to make it work. So it's really interesting seeing different types of opinions on that and watching it grow and develop.
I think it's fascinating that you point that out, because I would 100% agree. I think there are very smart people that reject Bitcoin today. And I joke that Number Go Up brought me back to Bitcoin, but Number Go Up brought me back to Bitcoin because I saw that the price of this thing kept going up. And I said to myself, why is the price of what's supposed to be a money changing at all? Aren't monies a stable thing against which we measure other things, right? That sometimes change in price, right? And that didn't make any sense to me. So I had to go down a personal rabbit hole of my own, just to say, what the heck is Bitcoin and why is it here? And for the same reason, I think those people that reject Bitcoin today, even, I had to figure out was that Bitcoin is a monetary technology. And it's something that, I've kind of talked to you in side channels about, but it's a monetary technology first and foremost, and that the technology that makes it work surrounds that. And some people that come to Bitcoin come to it just for the technology that surrounds it. Like, oh, they solved I almost just said the surgeon, the general's problem, the Byzantine general's problem. They solved that. That's so cool. Or like, oh, they're working on bulletproofs and cryptography. Some people come to it just for that, but like, I came to it to understand as a monetary technology, and I've spent most of my time doing research on why it's important as a monetary technology, and that requires real, investment of time.
Is that what led you to write about WTF Happened in 1971?
100%. It was doing research on it, because when you try to understand what money is, you have to, like, at some point take a look at what the system of money we have today is. And my background here is all these fiat currencies. You have to look, what is the history of, how did they come to be and how do they function? And one of the things you must eventually come to in research of the fiat monetary system is 1971, when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And I thought, to myself, that if Bitcoin is a better money because it's it has a hard capped 21 million supply, that when we took ourselves off the gold standard, then things probably would have gone worse, because that was the last kind of reins on the system. And if you go to like the Bretton Woods page or the Nixon shock page, you'll see some of the first few charts that we put up on the website, and that kind of like, that didn't start the genesis of the website, but we started kind of collecting things like that and said, like, look, here's why Bitcoin's important. Here's some of the data. And we would be like arguing with people on the internet and stuff. And we eventually like collected enough of these things that we're like, man, it's annoying to like constantly go through our phones. And we just like my buddy. So, you mentioned that I was the author of it, but I made it with my buddy, Heavily Armed Clown. We have our own podcast, the Bitcoin Echo Chamber. So we co-founded the website today. It was his idea to kind of like stick it up there and put the question at the top and not explain any of it. And if your viewers aren't familiar, it's just a bunch of data that shows how objectively some things have declined. And there's an inflection point in the data in 1971 where things are like, society is getting worse, at least in these particular areas. And our thesis obviously is that, because inflation and other things too, that I think there's a lot of second order effects that kind of trickle down from that, things that you wouldn't even consider. But
yeah, and I definitely visited your site, and it's a ton of good infographics of all correlating to a single time in history, like what's going on with our money, why is it changing in value so dramatically. And it's something I wasn't fully aware of until I saw your website, and kind of shows you that money is changing quickly, especially in 1971 and then 2008 in the mortgage crisis when Bitcoin was released. And even now it's still changing. With your background, you can see the Venezuelan currency, it's just no longer valuable. And it's something that Bitcoin is definitely proving to show that currency is going to change in a way where it's a globally accessible option. And for me, it's kind of what really struck to me. It's like, wow, the entire world can share one currency. The entire world can control it together, but we're still facing the struggle of power. Who wants to be able to control it? Who wants to be able to handle it? And I think the biggest struggle right now with humanity is understanding that people can have power, the power of the people. We don't need some specific entity telling us what the value is anymore.
Yeah, well, I think if you look back at the history of money, it's a really interesting story, because obviously we tried a bunch of different monetary technologies, a bunch of them it didn't end up working out so well for a lot of civilizations, and saw the downfall of those civilizations. And we converged as a globe on gold, and even gold had a lot of shortcomings. And that's a lot of the thesis of 1971 is some of the prehistory before 1971. 1971 was just a precipitous event. And what I'm getting at here is that gold has a number of drawbacks, especially when you compare it versus something like Bitcoin. One of them being verifiability. So like if you go back, we've been using coinage for quite some time. And it was a way of unifying, codifying money. So they had like equal units, like, this is a piece of 8, or this is a denarius, or, all these different things where the society can now had better economic calculation. But it introduced, as you were kind of pointing out, that there was somebody who had to organize that in the first place. And that as Satoshi says in the white paper, history is full of breaches of trust of the central authority. So by removing the central authority, we're in a new paradigm of money, and the implications of that are far-reaching and probably beyond the scope of this podcast.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of good information out there on that, and again, much to discuss on that topic. But we can continue to the, you and your co-author wrote, WTF Happened in 1971. When did you first, start working on what Bitcoin did? It's one of the top 10 podcasts about cryptocurrencies in the world. So it's you definitely had some transition period and some history period going into that. So if you want to explain a little bit more about your road into there.
Yeah, well, I like to joke that I was working in the restaurant industry, and I wanted to get out of that. I like to joke that I memed my way into this job because we kind of created WTF Happened in 1971 by accident, and it's a pretty prevalent meme in the the Bitcoin world now, and it ended up getting big enough that eventually Peter found out about it and invited us on the podcast. Peter McCormick, What Bitcoin Did. And he ended up getting us on even twice. So I had a relationship with him, and eventually I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I got a bunch of background in media production. Do you need any work done for me?" And he eventually offered me a job working for him and producing for him. So that was in the beginning of this year, and I started actually working for him full time in March. And I love it. I think Peter's hilarious. He's a good guy. He's trying to help educate people. He stands for really important topics. Yeah. He's a bit of a nut sometimes. He gets a lot of hard time, but it's I really enjoy it. I get to research and talk about Bitcoin and work on Bitcoin.
Did you always expect to become some type of influencer or someone who really is a motivated?
Oh my God, no! I hate that word. I never wanted to be one. I've never tried to be one. I had to stop you there because listen, I remember very specifically when I started getting, I started on Reddit and realized like Reddit is not as great as Twitter for really understanding Bitcoin and getting into the conversation. But that was my goal. My goal was to be part of the conversation, at least even if it was just as a student, to be at least close enough to the people that were smart enough that I could learn about Bitcoin. And then that progressed into now I want to be able to have be able to bounce ideas off other people, and that progressed into like really like now I want to be part of this conversation of what Bitcoin is, where it's going, and why it's important. And I've never like wanted any kind of fame. In fact, like I think my follower number is getting kind of high now. I've thought about already like putting like some people like Turdermist or put it protected. Like I don't want it. I don't want hundreds of thousands of people following me.
That's not a choice though. Sometimes
that's not good. No.
If you want to be active, it's just not, it happens.
Yeah, but does that make sense? Like I hate that the idea of
you just want to express your ideas and opinions, but you don't want people necessarily taking you so literally, maybe on every word, or
I just want to have a conversation. That's all. I just want to talk.
Get the most follows with the conversations. I mean, it's so hard for somebody to have a conversation maybe online on Twitter with Elon Musk, but maybe Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk, they'd reply to each other on Twitter. So sometimes it is the number of followers gives you the right or the pathway to speaking with other individuals. But
it's very true. But like, in order to play that game, you really do have to play that game, because it's like, I spent, probably a year researching all this stuff, and I made this like really long inflation thread after like a lot of work and a lot of conversations I had, and it gained a lot of attention. I think it got up to, like 1.7K likes and 300,000 impressions or something
That's
like that.
really
It's
good,
like
yeah.
pretty good, whatever. I had like 4,000 followers at the time, so it's not bad. And then the other day I put a meme up, and the meme was the two guys are at the booths,
Yeah.
and one booth has a bunch of guys at it and the other one doesn't, and the one where the doesn't like is like 30K Bitcoin, and then the one with the booth with all the people at it's the 60K Bitcoin. And that post got as many likes as my like super long like intellectual threat. So it's like I if I wanted to get the number higher, I could probably just keep doing memes and stuff like that.
I
But
mean,
I
memeing
don't
is a job on its own. I've seen tons of crypto projects put job postings for meme maker, meme generator, or meme lord. It's just, that's how we get people's attention nowadays, is just by memeing. And I mean, I fall for it too. I mean, sometimes I get sucked into the memes and start laughing at them and try to create my own. But it's yeah, people are kind of losing out on the intellectual part of the conversation, where it's beyond just trading prices and more about what cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is doing for the population in general.
Well, I think memes are very important because it kind of goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about like too
Mm-hmm.
much information, right? That the reason a meme is so powerful is because it's concise. It can get a very complex idea sometimes across to a very large audience very quickly, and sometimes even has a hint of
Yeah.
entertainment at the same time. A meme can just be a sentence, right? But we think of a meme as like, oh, it has to be like this graphic with like a caption. It's like, that's not. A meme is something that's mimetic, that kind of programs your mind and is viral. And I think that's useful in the too much information age, that we can get an idea across in that way. It's just it's I think part of it also is that our culture is so high time preference, which is that Austrian economics term that means that like you favor the short term versus like
Yeah.
thinking long term. That we are like a instant gratification generation, and like we're not willing to read a 30-page paper, but if you have a funny graphic with a guy on it and a stick figure, then I'm all ears for that, right? Like so I think there's a lot of kind of things that are competing there.
Yeah.
But,
And yeah, it's true. But it's something to, it's definitely, I think, overall better if it's used wisely. But yeah, it's something that, the internet's always crazy about. So hopefully people try to use it more efficiently than just for the likes. Um, but yeah, I wanted to also know more about, since you were a musician, you still play some music. Was there any part of you or any type of time where you wanted to correlate your cryptocurrency knowledge with your music? Would you ever consider somehow, putting NFTs on the Bitcoin network or Ethereum network, or have you had any ideas of, bringing music onto the chain?
I don't think so. I might, at some point for the meme of it, like make a Bitcoin kind of song or something like that. But NFTs for me, I don't see a lot of use for them. I think of NFTs like a digital autograph, and I don't see it as anything more than that. And for what it's worth, autographs and collectibles is it's millions of dollars, $1 billion. I don't know what the number is. It's a huge industry, and a lot of people are into that. I've never been into it myself. I don't really see the value myself, except for a way to sell something to people, and I've never really enjoyed selling my art. And if you want to take donations, Bitcoin already makes that very easy. So to me, I don't see the appeal of NFTs because I think they're just a digital autograph, and I think there's a lot of hype around this concept of people saying, "Oh, well, it's going to do like royalties and DRM," and I haven't seen that yet. So.
Yeah, I think I'm very excited for the part where it's beyond just the price for a painting or a picture or some type of artwork. Not to devalue art, I think, we obviously have art that's in history that's worth, it's pretty much priceless, like the Mona Lisa. It's just something we all appreciate and have and treasure. And I think that aspect is a whole different aspect than what NFTs can bring to us, where, as you were saying, it might just be a digital signature, but a signature is everything, especially now with any legal requirements, legal documents. If I sign any paperwork, it's all about the signature. So being able to bring the physical world into the digital world and have some type of signature, I think is still crucial for our development. And I think it's doesn't have to be about the price or what type of monetary value it brings. It's more that proof of signage.
Well, I mean, digital signatures are very important. I'm not trying to belittle digital signatures at all. I think there's so much hype and money chasing this NFT craze right now that, if somebody is thinking about it from any kind of economic sense, I would caution them to kind of take a step back and like let some of this foam and fervor die down and really look at what's actually happening, because digital signatures, we use them all the time. We use them on our cell phones, our all end-to-end encryption. Everything uses digital signatures. Bitcoin uses digital signatures. Everything uses digital signatures. That's important. I think the NFT scene, people think that it's way more than it really is, and for me, that's an echo of the ICO boom. It's like, oh, well, now we can, I just made a Bitcoin, but it's like faster or whatever. It has more TPS and more transactions. And we saw that whole hype die down. And I'm seeing a lot of echoes of that and a lot of malinvestment, which is another Austrian economics term, where people are putting their money in anything because they can't put it in dollars, right? And that kind of spills over into these things. So I'm not saying that they're completely useless to everybody. I just personally have no use for them currently, and I think there's way more hype than they deserve at this point.
That makes sense, and yeah, it's totally right on that. Where people are definitely finding places or any place to try to put their money in, just to make some type of profit, and usually that doesn't work out too well. I know I've fell into some poor ICO projects back in 2017 that I truly regret, and probably could have just kept it into Bitcoin and would have been much
guilty. Yep.
And anyone that says they're not guilty, I feel like, you got to have something, because it's just too hard not to try. But, it's all about good marketing nowadays. Yeah. So again, going back onto what Bitcoin did, who was the most wholesome guest you've had on the show? Like some guests you're just like, wow, this guy is, some societal good.
Well, I would like to say Nick Carter, but I don't know if you follow the Nick Carter escapades. Apparently, he's destroying the planet, so it couldn't be Nick Carter. So it'd have to be Alex Gladstein. He's probably the golden boy of Bitcoin right now. He, if you're not familiar with Alex Gladstein, he works for the Human Rights Human Rights Association. Why am I forgetting? HRF, Human Rights Foundation. He's the chief. Oh my God, I'm just blanking on him right today. But he's amazing. He is an advocate for human rights around the world. He talks about how Bitcoin helps people escape from authoritarian governments. He's written some amazing articles. He wrote a great article on the petrodollar system. He just came out with another one recently, Palestine. And I think that the wholesome mission of this guy to help people around the world, the people that need this technology the most, one of my favorite things that he'll do is he'll find somebody that's like, how we were talking about people that kind of crap on Bitcoin or whatever without understanding why this technology is important. They live in a place of privilege. So he wrote an article called Check Your Financial Privilege. So like if one of these guys comes out like, I can't believe all these crypto bros are like into this thing that's like just destroying the planet or whatever, he goes like, you need to check your financial privilege. People in Nigeria are using this, like, people in Venezuela are using this to survive. Dissidents in other countries are using this to escape, authoritarian regimes. People are using it in Hong Kong to help protest against the government. So it's, I think that is one of the most compelling stories in all of.
That's a beautiful thing, because I feel like as an American, it's pretty hard for me to make sense to use Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency on a day-to-day basis. It's just transactions still cost money, even no matter how little or how much it is. I still have PayPal, I still have Venmo, I still have Cash App, Zelle. I have all these different ways of doing financial transactions within America and within Americans that are free. No fees, no wait time. It's pretty instant. And it's hard to convince myself and convince the American population that crypto is important. And when you look at the biggest selling point for me is I look at other countries that need this to escape their authoritarian government or need this to, store their own value for their hard-earned work. And yeah.
Well, listen. I 100% agree with you. But that's my point. Is that Bitcoin is not a payments technology. It's a monetary technology, and that just like you say, in the Western world, we live in a state where we have plenty of payments technologies, right? And they work really well in the Western world for privileged people like you and me. What we do not need is payments technology. But I think what's actually preventing Bitcoin from being used more widely in places in the Western world is tax regulations. There's onerous reporting tax burden, and just like really, it's not so much paying the tax. It's like every single time you spend, like, with Lightning, for example, you can play a Lightning video game and earn 1 sat at a time, and you might do that 100 times a minute. And technically, you have to report and collect all the information of every single time when you would collect each one of these things, the cost basis of it, and like when you sold one of them by paying some kind of video game or any kind of thing. That's really what's preventing it for I think, in my opinion, because yes, while you're saying that PayPal and Venmo are zero fees, right? Lightning is getting very close to being like a zero fee, or very almost negligible fees. 1 Satoshi is like 0.00025 cents or something like that, right? So the cost is not the problem, but Lightning as a technology, as being an open technology, is going to make like, for example, I don't know if you've seen the stuff with like Lightning authorization, where they're using like LNURL to do authorization, so that like I can now sign into a web page by opening a Lightning wallet, and like the web page that I'm trying to sign into will send a challenge to my node or my wallet, and my wallet will give a cryptographic response, so that I can now log in without a username, without a password. And I could do this now to a bunch of different websites, and it could each one can get a completely different username and password, so to speak, a public and private response from me. And it's a much better system. You don't have to worry about passwords at all. These things can't track you across multiple things. I mean, think about like Google Auth and all these things. So I think the technology is already like going to be like exponentially better than what we use for quote unquote payments technology today. But it's really the regulation that's getting in the way of it, going back to even the infrastructure bill and all this crap that's happening right now.
It's tough to manage all the microtransactions that are happening within cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. It's just, there's too many going on at too fast, where it's hard to keep track. But that's where the other side of it comes in, when we start developing better machine learning technologies that can read all those transactions and calculate the taxes for us without having to do it ourselves or even double check it.
Yeah, but across like, a bunch of different wallets on a bunch of different devices. And then you have this machine learning algorithm that's collecting all your data, and that becomes another honeypot. That's worse. What we need is a de minimis exemption from the regulations, right? Like at the very least, like exempt transactions under $1,000 per day, right? So that like, or maybe even $500 per day. So that like, I can pay for a cup of coffee on Lightning and not have to like, worry about trying to, using a machine learning algorithm to collect my tax information.
But the thing is that exactly that, like you're saying, using Lightning or using some type of payment processor, that is the future eventually. One day, once Bitcoin grows to a point where it's a common household money that everyone has or has some part of, or people are getting paid in Bitcoin. I think that's a real goal in life, is once we start getting paid in Bitcoin, that's when things start turning around and people would look at it more of a payment platform, payment use, rather than just an investment or a monetary hold.
Yeah, and the volatility makes that a little bit hard for people. But it's one of these things that I think it's putting the cart before the horse to worry about payments now. Again, Bitcoin has to become a money before you can worry about that stuff. And that process of monetization is a process that requires volatility because it has to get bigger, and it getting bigger is part of that volatility. So it's just a process that we've never seen happen in real time before. So we don't know what it looks like because we don't have any precedent for that.
Gotcha. And yeah, it makes sense. Hopefully one day we'll see it sooner than later, but that's what we're all working for.
Well, you mentioned like the amount of people that use Bitcoin in the United States, for example. Like that number has been basically doubling for every year or two. So like in 2 to 3 years, like half of the U.S. population will at least have Bitcoin, right? And then a few more years after that, like it gets really hard to like be a politician that is like has anti Bitcoin stance.
Yeah, especially when our generation starts going into more political positions. Yeah, hopefully, anyone listening, hopefully you can ask your boss or your employer that you can get paid in Bitcoin. That'll get their gears going. Hopefully, adopt it.
Well, yeah, and you can use Bitwage or whatever, so you can like send your direct deposit to Bitwage, and they'll even send you some of it in fiat and some of it in Bitcoin too, or Stack, DCA, whatever. There's options for everybody. Like you don't have to like pressure your employer. Again, I think it's like the kind of the merchant adoption thing we were doing in 2017. We're like, oh look, like Microsoft's accepting Bitcoin now. Like Bitcoin's going to the moon. It's like no, like that's not how it goes. Like it has to become money first. So use it yourself for the way that works for you, which is going to be different for somebody how it uses it in Nigeria or El Salvador or whatever, right?
Now, how would you say cryptocurrency changed your life then? Is it a total shift? Did you ever, what would you be doing now if it wasn't for learning about Bitcoin?
Well, I think the biggest thing that it did was give me hope because I always, kind of looked at the world and tried to ask myself, like, why, despite all of this technology, because like I said, I've always been in technology. I think technology is amazing. Why, despite all this technological progress, and even like what seemed like social progress, if you just like look in this really narrow view of like, oh, we used to have slaves like not that long ago and now we don't. So that's like also better, right? So like even these two kind of narrow prongs of society are marching forward in some way. Why does it seem like things are getting worse for like average Americans? Why does it seem like, even in the span of my lifetime, I feel like I worked hard, I've had like decent kind of jobs, and like it's hard to even save money at all, right? It's hard to buy a house now. It's like, why are these things happening? And obviously, I think Bitcoin is a sound money. I think it eliminates inflation. I think it reorganizes society because money is a coordinating function of society through the price system. And I think that that's ultimately given me hope that a lot of this stagnation and kind of downtrend has been a problem of the money itself. And Bitcoin fixes this, and Bitcoin is very hard to kill. So I'm very hopeful.
And it definitely goes back to what you were saying before about too much data. It's people are being fed a lot of information very quickly, and most of the time it's negative information. Sometimes it's positive, but no matter what it is, it's just we're being fed a lot, and it's a lot to learn faster and faster. It's kind of like we might be in a great society where we kind of have all of our needs met, but what we're learning about is so much more that we're missing. And that kind of brings you find a way to bring us back to reality, back to being grounded and saying, we have it pretty good and we need to share that and bring it to different parts of the world and create a more accessible way to attain this type of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think realigning human cooperation globally is definitely the number one goal. And I think you're already seeing that. Like, we were talking about we're being privileged being in the Western developed kind of places. The developing countries look at Bitcoin volumes, peer-to-peer trading volumes, Argentina, Nigeria, Turkey, Iran, Venezuela, all these places. It's just skyrocketing, right? These people are desperate for a store of value. And, like I said, later it has to filter into actually becoming a money there and becoming a unit of account and a medium exchange. But it's just a process. And I have a lot of hope for those places because I think inflation has ravaged specifically Africa. Africa has been one of the, and I think that's like a really long history of money kind of story. But I do have hope for
Cardano is really pushing their agenda into Africa. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
And what's the Cardano agenda?
They're bringing themselves the Cardano coin. They're trying to bring that into Africa and try to have that as the coin to use in that country.
And why do you think that would be better
I don't
than
know if it would be
Bitcoin?
better or worse. I'm just I'm just curious to see how it's going to go. I'm always curious on every project. I wait to see who proves themselves to be better.
I think Charles is a scammer.
You might,
Did you see him on Lex Friedman?
I did not.
Go watch that
I love
episode.
Lex. He's,
I think he's a scammer. I think Charles, I don't
oh
trust him
man,
at all, and I don't think he makes a good
I gotta
argument.
see
So
it. Maybe I'll have him on the show one day. Let's see. And but yeah, from there, are there any new exciting projects that you're looking on, excited about, reading about?
but right now, Bolt 12 on Lightning is amazing. It basically, the idea that like, in 2017, oh, here's a donation Bitcoin
Yeah.
address. So you can just like generate a single address, but it's like, it ends up being really bad for privacy, but it's really useful. You don't need like a whole BTC Pay server just to use the thing. Excuse me. I think Bolt 12 does that not only for Lightning, but also in a private way. So you basically have a QR code. It's static. You don't need a web server at all. And when your wallet sees the QR code, your wallet looks up the node using the Lightning Network messaging system. So it doesn't use the web page at all, has nothing to do with this. It goes and talks to the node using the onion routed network, finds out like you can get an invoice from the node, or you can get this thing to pay you. Like this could be used in an
Oh
ATM
wow.
where you withdraw sats from the ATM by scanning the QR code, and all of this hides the node IDs from each other, so it's private. And it's just amazing for being able to being donated very small amounts, which is not Bitcoin is not good for today on chain. So I actually think that's really fascinating. So it's called Bolt 12. You can go to Bolt 12. Excuse me. It's called Bolt 12. You can go to bolt12.org. It's specifically the offers part of it, but Bolt 12 has a whole bunch of other stuff in there too, like Merkleized trees, so you can like prove something about a payment without revealing other details about yourself, and it's just
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
that's a new thing I've been seeing a lot in the crypto industry is the privacy aspect that people are realizing, like you said in the
Yeah,
beginning, that Bitcoin is not necessarily an anonymous coin, neither is Ethereum or any public chain. Uh, but it's always great to see that there's different layers being added on or different protocols that are being worked on to try to make it into a more anonymous coin, but still keeping the flavor of crypto that you love so much.
the privacy battle is going to be large, and I mean that in two ways. Like I think there's going to be a big battle to get privacy on the base layer in
Hmm.
Bitcoin. I personally tend to think that privacy is coming on the second layers, and it isn't something we need on the base layer. But I also mean that the privacy battle in the regulatory regime, I think they don't like this privacy technology. I'm telling you about this Bolt 12 thing. You've been into, Bitcoin and crypto for how long? You've never heard of it.
Yep.
Like these people have no idea what we're talking about. They don't even know what a second layer is, let alone privacy technology. So once they start to figure that stuff out, they're going to be like, wait a second, you're saying they have anonymous transactions?
It's gonna
And
sound worse.
that's going to be a whole nother battle as well. But, it's really hard. At the bottom of WTF Happened in
Yep.
1971, we have a quote from Hayek that says, I don't think we'll ever have a good money again. That is until we take the thing out of the hands of governments, and we can't take it out violently. We have to instead introduce in some sly roundabout way, something that they can't stop. And I think having anonymous payments is good. I think, yes, criminals can use it, but criminals can use clothes and cars and guns, and we don't ban
Yeah.
those things either, because these tools are really important for society. And ultimately, most people are driven to crime because their situations are bad anyway. So, but this privacy fight is going to be huge, and I hope the technology is good enough. I don't like fighting, but I at the same time, if things are like completely unenforceable, they're really hard to regulate anyway. And sometimes, it's like BitTorrent, right? Like BitTorrent was like You know the whole BitTorrent story where it was like Napster and then LimeWire and all these things, and then BitTorrent came along and they were kind of like, I guess there's nothing we can do, you know. So I kind of like hope for that
Yeah,
type
it's a
of
sad
scenario.
thing. They always try to make an example of some person that, you know, uploaded some movie, or like Ross, where he was jailed for creating the Silk Road. It's just trying to make examples out of people that doesn't necessarily help, and just brings more attention to that gives people more intention to work with that software, work with that type of technology.
100%.
Sweet. Last thing I wanted to ask you to end it in a wholesome way. What made you smile the most recently?
What made me smile the
What
most
gave you a
recently?
grin to grin, an ear to ear?
Bitcoin's pumping today. That's made me smile, man. I don't know if that's very
No, it's
wholesome or
awesome.
not, but I think Bitcoin getting bigger is great for the world. So in a sense, that's what makes me happy. But I'm also a greedy person, I guess. So I'm
We
happy to
all
see
like to
number
see
go up.
some
But
increase in value, so it's always fun. Well, thank you for being on the show, Ben. I appreciate your time. And for everyone else, please visit his WTF Happened in 1971 and What Bitcoin Did. Thank you for listening. See ya.